When my wife Jessica hit $3 million on our cryptocurrency investment and ran off with her wealth advisor lover, her family stood inside the Mecklenburg County courthouse, smirking at me like I was roadkill they'd scraped off their designer shoes. But when the judge cleared his throat and read from the very partnership agreement I'd helped draft 5 years earlier, the whole room went dead silent. Jessica's perfect smile cracked like cheap paint. Her sister's manicured hands started trembling like autumn leaves. And for the first time since she'd gutted my life, I felt something rise in my chest that wasn't shame or rage. It was justice, cold and patient as winter steel. But that moment of vindication didn't fall from the sky. It crawled up from the deepest pit of humiliation I'd ever known. And it started the night I walked into my own home and discovered I'd been living with a stranger who'd been planning my destruction. My name is Wade Sullivan. I'm 45 years old, born and raised in Charlotte, North Carolina. For 23 years, I've been selling industrial equipment across the Southeast. Conveyor systems to BMW in Spartanburg, pneumatic tools to Caterpillar in Clayton, HVAC systems to hospitals from Atlanta to Raleigh. I worked my way up from cold calling territory rep to regional sales manager for Pinnacle Industrial Solutions, handling accounts worth anywhere from $200K to $7 million. I know contracts the way a carpenter knows wood grain. I can spot a liability clause buried in page 47 of a procurement agreement, and I've learned that the difference between a handshake deal and ironclad documentation is the difference between feeding your family and losing your house. I drive a paid-off F-250 Super Duty that's never failed to start, brew Maxwell House at 5 a.m. because expensive coffee doesn't make the morning come any easier, and listen to sports talk radio during my 100-mile drives between manufacturing plants and construction sites across the Carolinas. My wife Jessica used to say she married me because I was reliable. Later, she'd say she felt limited by my ambition. Funny how the same steadiness can sound like security one year and a ceiling the next. We'd been doing well financially, better than most couples our age. Jessica worked as a medical device sales rep, pulling down six figures selling surgical equipment to hospitals across the Carolinas. Between her commissions and my territory bonuses, we were comfortable. More than comfortable, actually. But comfortable wasn't enough for Jessica. Not after Bitcoin started climbing past $20,000, then $30,000, then $40,000 per coin. And her family? God, they never let me forget that her father, Richard Coleman, had owned 3 auto dealerships before selling out to a corporate chain for serious money. They acted like I should genuflect because he wore Italian leather shoes instead of steel-toed boots and drove a Porsche Cayenne instead of a work truck. Her sister Diane had mastered the art of delivering criticism wrapped in concern, the kind of passive-aggressive warfare that Southern women perfect like a martial art. The night everything collapsed, I remember the details with the kind of razor-sharp clarity that trauma burns into your brain. The garage door shuddering against the October wind as I pulled it shut, the metallic echo bouncing off concrete walls. The house felt wrong immediately, not just quiet, but hollowed out, like someone had surgically removed its soul. No CNN murmuring Jessica's political opinions from the living room. No clatter of her experimenting with some food blogger's life-changing quinoa recipe. Not even the mechanical hum of our coffee maker's timer, counting down to a morning that would never come the way I expected. Then I caught the scent hanging in the air like perfume from a funeral. Jessica's signature fragrance, that $150 bottle from Nordstrom, except now it smelled like goodbye. I called her name once, my voice bouncing off walls that suddenly felt too large, too empty, like shouting into a cave. "Jessica?" The word came back to me hollow and mocking. Walking into our bedroom, I stopped breathing. Her walk-in closet door gaped open like a wound. Half the hangers swayed naked, stripped of everything that had made this place feel like home. The Louis Vuitton suitcase from our Charleston anniversary weekend? Gone. Her nightstand drawer hung open, violated, and inside was a piece of her company letterhead, folded with the surgical precision she used for everything. "Don't call me. I deserve more than this. You'll figure it out." That last line, "You'll figure it out," hit me like a steel-toed boot to the solar plexus. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "This isn't your fault." Just the cold dismissal you'd give a service tech after he's finished fixing your air conditioner. 22 years of marriage reduced to a homework assignment she was dumping on my desk. I sat on the edge of our king-size bed, staring at the empty space where her charging station used to live, where her phone had buzzed with late-night client calls that I now realized weren't about medical devices at all. My chest felt like someone had opened my ribcage with a crowbar and was slowly tightening a vise around my lungs. The house suddenly felt 20 degrees colder, and that's when my phone lit up with the kind of buzz that changes everything. Carl from Hopkins Hardware had screenshot something that made my blood turn to slush. A Facebook post from Austin Brooks, some slick wealth advisor Jessica had mentioned meeting at a pharmaceutical conference. There he was, arm wrapped around my wife's waist in front of a red Tesla Model S Plaid, both holding champagne flutes with the caption, "New beginnings, smart investments, and even smarter partners. Ex-wine crypto millionaire now living the dream." My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. At first, folks around Charlotte didn't know what to say. Word travels fast in business circles, especially when someone's personal life explodes across social media. By the next morning, whispers followed me into client meetings, at Bojangles, at the gas station, even during the weekly sales calls. Most people tried to be professional about it, but pity has a smell, and I was drowning in it. The worst came during our quarterly review meeting at Hutchinson Manufacturing, our biggest client. I was presenting Q4 projections to 8 department heads around a mahogany conference table that cost more than most people's cars, clicking through slides about production efficiency upgrades and cost-benefit analyses. Everything was going smoothly until the conference room door opened and Jessica's sister Diane walked in, wearing a pharmaceutical liaison badge and a smile sharp enough to cut glass. She'd apparently landed a position there as a medical equipment liaison, probably pulled strings through Daddy's business connections. She looked me up and down like I was a coffee stain on her Hermes blouse, then announced to the entire room with the volume of a dinner theater actress, "Wade, I'm honestly surprised you're still showing your face around here. I mean, after what happened with Jessica and the Bitcoin situation, most men would have the decency to just disappear." 8 pairs of eyes locked onto me like targeting lasers. The silence was thick enough to choke on, broken only by the hum of the projector and someone's uncomfortable throat clearing. My PowerPoint slide about conveyor belt efficiency suddenly felt as relevant as cave paintings. I could feel my professional reputation crumbling in real time, 23 years of relationship building evaporating because this woman decided to detonate my personal life in front of my biggest client. I didn't respond. Couldn't trust myself to. Instead, I gathered my presentation materials with the mechanical precision of a man in shock, muttered something about rescheduling, and walked out. Left a potential 6-figure equipment deal on that conference table like abandoned luggage. Later, I sat in my truck in the parking garage, engine idling, watching rain streak down the windshield like the tears I refused to let fall. The financial damage was swift and surgical. Jessica had cleaned out our joint savings account. $85,000 gone. The emergency fund we'd built over 15 years, another $40,000 vanished. And the cryptocurrency wallet we'd started together back in 2019, that beautiful digital treasure chest that had grown from our initial $500,000 investment to over $3 million was now apparently all hers, according to her newly hired attorney from one of Charlotte's white shoe law firms. 2 days later, I received a formal legal notice that made my blood pressure spike into stroke territory. Jessica was petitioning for exclusive possession of our house and demanding I pay rent if I wanted to stay, until the divorce was finalized. Rent. On the home I'd been paying the mortgage on for 8 years, while she spent her money on designer handbags and spa weekends in Asheville. That night, I slept in the guest room above my buddy Carl's hardware store, too humiliated to explain the details to anyone else, listening to the radiator clank and wondering how my life had become someone else's cruel joke. I didn't know then that buried in my home office, inside a manila folder tucked behind tax returns and warranty documents, was the very thing that would save me. But that discovery was still weeks away. Right now, all I had was an empty house, a bruised ego, and the growing realization that Jessica wasn't just leaving. She was trying to erase me entirely from the financial landscape we'd built together. After a week of sleeping on Carl's couch and pretending everything was normal during client calls, I finally swallowed my pride and called Linda Foster, an attorney I'd met through the Chamber of Commerce. Her office occupied the entire third floor of a restored building in Dilworth, all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Charlotte skyline. Legal diplomas and bar certifications covered one wall, but what caught my attention was a single photo of Linda holding a massive salmon on Lake Norman, grinning like she'd just conquered the world. Linda shook my hand firmly, her grip stronger than some contractors I'd worked with. "Wade Sullivan, I've heard good things about your work with the industrial accounts. Sit down, tell me everything." I did, slowly, methodically, like I was walking through a technical specification for a conveyor system. She took notes in a legal pad that looked like it had survived several courtroom wars. When I finished, she leaned back in her leather chair with the expression of someone calculating complex probabilities. "Wade, cryptocurrency acquired during marriage is marital property, period. The problem is, Jessica's going to fight this with every dollar she's got, and she's got 3 million reasons to fight hard." I nodded. I expected as much. But then Linda asked something that made my memory stir like sediment in still water. "Did you and Jessica ever sign any partnership agreements? Anything related to investments or business ventures? I'm talking about documents, contracts, anything that might establish joint ownership beyond the marriage certificate." My brain started clicking through files like a computer hard drive searching for data. There was something. Back in 2019, when we'd first gotten serious about cryptocurrency, when Bitcoin was climbing past 7,000 and Jessica was reading every investment blog she could find, I'd insisted on documenting everything because too many years in industrial sales had taught me that verbal agreements were worth exactly what you paid for them. "There might be something," I said, my voice gaining strength as the memory solidified. "If there is, it's probably in my home office. Back when we started investing, I made Jessica sign partnership documents. She thought I was being paranoid, but I'd seen too many business deals go sideways because people trusted handshakes instead of paperwork." Linda leaned forward, her eyes sharpening like a predator catching scent. "Find it, fast, and I mean yesterday fast." 3 days later, the court granted me exactly 1 hour to retrieve personal documents from the house before Jessica changed the locks. I drove there early, parking across the street for a few minutes to gather myself. The house looked exactly the same from the outside, but it felt like foreign territory, like a place I'd visited in a dream that had turned into a nightmare. When the sheriff arrived, a professional guy named Deputy Morrison, who treated the whole situation like the unfortunate business it was, he gave me a courteous nod. "You've got 60 minutes, sir. I'll wait in the driveway. Keep everything civil." Walking through my own front door felt like trespassing in my own life. Jessica had stripped the place of anything that suggested warmth or shared history. Photos gone from the walls, decorative items missing, even the throw pillows had vanished like they'd never existed. I went straight to my office, flicking on the light that illuminated my sanctuary of organized chaos. File cabinets were half empty, papers scattered across my desk like someone had searched through everything in angry frustration. It looked like Jessica had stormed through looking for anything valuable, but she'd always hated my obsessive filing system, as she called it, with that particular tone of condescension she'd perfected over the years. I pulled open the bottom drawer of my desk, digging through folders with the methodical precision of a man whose life depended on finding the right piece of paper. Old client contracts, warranty information, tax documents from 2018, 2019, 2020. My hands were shaking as I worked, sweat beading on my forehead despite the October chill. About 38 minutes in, yes, I checked my watch constantly because time was literally money now, I heard a car slow in front of the house. Through the office window, I saw a white Lexus SUV with Richard Coleman behind the wheel. He sat there watching the house like a security guard, probably making sure I didn't take anything he considered valuable. The sight of him made my chest tighten with a mixture of rage and determination. This man who'd spent family dinners lecturing me about proper business practices was now treating me like a common thief. I swallowed the anger and went back to work, my heart pounding loud enough to echo in my ears. I shoved aside folders of old insurance policies, sending Christmas card lists and warranty cards scattering to the floor. Behind them, wedged between a stack of equipment manuals and a box of business cards from a trade show, I saw something that made my breath catch. A manila envelope labeled Cryptocurrency Investment Partnership, 2019. My knees hit the office carpet as I reached for it, with hands that were trembling like I had Parkinson's. Inside were 3 documents that I remembered forcing Jessica to review and sign back when Bitcoin was climbing through $8,000 and she was getting investment advice from YouTube videos. Our initial investment agreement outlining the $500,000 we were putting into cryptocurrency. A partnership structure I'd drafted using language I'd learned from 20 years of industrial contracts. And a signed addendum from 2021 when we'd increased our positions and Bitcoin was climbing toward its all-time highs. Every page bore both our signatures, notarized by Sarah Chen at the bank where we'd gotten the cashier's check for our initial investment. My hands shook as I read the key clause that I'd insisted on, the language that Jessica had signed without really reading because she was eager to get started on what she called our ticket to early retirement. All cryptocurrency assets acquired through this partnership remain joint property of both parties, regardless of account management or individual transaction authority. This partnership supersedes individual account access and establishes permanent 50-50 ownership of all digital assets acquired during the duration of this agreement. I'd written those words myself, insisted on them because I'd learned from industrial equipment contracts that whoever controls the equipment doesn't necessarily own it. Control and ownership were 2 different legal concepts, and I'd made sure our agreement reflected that distinction. Jessica had signed eagerly, barely skimming the legal language because she was already planning how to spend the profits. The sheriff called from the doorway. 5 minutes, Mr. Sullivan. I tucked the envelope under my arm and walked past the white Lexus without looking at Richard Coleman, though I could feel his eyes tracking me like I was some kind of criminal. The engine revved as I crossed the lawn, but no one rolled down a window. They just watched, probably wondering what I'd managed to find in my hour of supervised access to my own home. That evening, Carl drove me to Linda's office, the envelope sitting on my lap like a bomb that might either explode in my face or save my life. I sat across from her mahogany desk as she adjusted her reading glasses and flipped through the pages with the slow, deliberate pace of someone who'd learned not to get excited until she'd read every word twice. Her lips tightened with each clause she reviewed, and I watched her eyebrows climb higher with every paragraph. Then she stopped, went back, read again. Her expression transformed from professional interest to something approaching amazement. She closed the document softly, sat back in her leather chair, and stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time since I'd walked into her office. "Wade," she said, her voice low and almost reverent, like she was announcing the discovery of buried treasure. "I've been practicing law for 25 years, and Jessica's father, bless his self-serving heart, just handed us the keys to the kingdom. He pushed you to document everything properly, and in doing so, he tied his own family up in legal knots they'll never untangle." She tapped the partnership agreement with one finger. "This document just made you $1.5 million." The room tilted slightly like I was standing on the deck of a boat in rough water. The faint ticking of the wall clock grew louder. My throat tightened, and for the first time since Jessica had walked out of my life, I felt something that wasn't pain or humiliation or rage. I felt air return to my lungs. I felt my spine straighten for the first time in weeks. Hope, real, solid hope that tasted like victory and felt like justice. But hope doesn't pay legal fees, and it sure doesn't stop someone with $3 million from hiring the kind of attorneys who eat guys like me for breakfast. The real fight was just beginning, and Jessica was about to come at me with every legal weapon her new fortune could buy. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for December 15th, Linda said, which gave us 6 weeks to prepare our case and gather evidence. Those weeks turned into the hardest academic course of my life, spending evenings in Linda's office going through blockchain transaction records, partnership law, and cryptocurrency regulations, while maintaining my day job and pretending everything was normal during client calls. During one long session, Linda paused from reviewing bank statements and looked up at me with the kind of maternal concern that reminded me why I trusted her. "Wade, you holding up okay? You look like you haven't slept in a week." I shrugged, suddenly feeling every one of my 45 years. "I'm tired, embarrassed. I feel like everyone's watching me fail in real time." She softened a bit, closing her legal pad and leaning back in her chair. "You're not failing. You're just caring too much about what people think. Happens to the best of us, and it's exactly what predators like your wife count on." Those words, simple as they were, gave me something solid to stand on for the next few weeks. People underestimate how much power kindness has when you're drowning in your own life. And then came the Facebook Live incident that changed everything. Jessica's brother Dale, a man whose hobbies included cheap beer, cheaper opinions, and filming himself doing both, went live on a Saturday night from someone's cluttered basement. He was red-faced and half-drunk, sitting in a recliner that had seen better decades, holding up what looked like a packet of legal papers while slurring his words like he was auditioning for a reality TV show about family dysfunction. We had to help Mel with this separation thing, he announced to his 12 followers, waving the documents like they were winning lottery tickets. You know, had to backdate some stuff so the courts think it was filed before she hit the Bitcoin jackpot. Gotta protect family, right? He laughed then, that ugly laugh of stupid people who think they're clever, and spilled beer on himself before the video cut off. But not before half of Charlotte's business community saw it, screenshot it, and forwarded it to people who forwarded it to other people. Linda had a copy within 2 hours, delivered by a paralegal who'd seen it shared in a local Facebook group for legal professionals. She called me at 9:30 that night while I was lying on Carl's couch, staring at the ceiling and wondering how my life had become a cautionary tale. "Wade, sit down," she said, though she knew I was already horizontal. This just became a lot easier. Jessica's family just confessed to fraud on social media. But Jessica didn't give up. Giving up wasn't her style, especially not when the stakes were this high. The next morning, she called me directly, something she hadn't done since the night she'd disappeared from my life. I almost didn't pick up, but something told me to hear whatever threat was coming my way. "You think you're clever?" she hissed the moment I answered, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "That video means nothing. Dale was drunk. Nobody's going to believe some rambling idiot over medical professionals and business documentation." There was a pause, and I could hear her breathing like she was trying to control herself. "I will destroy you in court, Wade. I will take everything you think you're entitled to, and when it's over, you'll be exactly what you've always been, a nobody." "Threaten me all you want, Jessica," I said quietly, surprised by how calm my own voice sounded. "But threats don't change partnership agreements, and they sure don't change the fact that your brother just confessed to fraud on video." There was a long, sharp silence, then a click. She hung up, but not before I heard something in her voice I'd never heard before. Genuine fear. The more the truth leaked out through Dale's drunken confession and subsequent social media damage control attempts, the more I noticed something surprising happening around Charlotte. People started treating me differently, not with pity anymore, but with a kind of quiet respect that I'd forgotten existed. The guys at the VFW saved me a seat again when I finally worked up the courage to show my face. The cashiers at Harris Teeter smiled with genuine warmth instead of that polite sympathy that had followed me for months. Even my boss at Pinnacle Industrial pulled me aside one afternoon and said, "Keep your chin up, Sullivan. Folks around here know good men when they see them, and they know gold-digging trouble when they see it too." Those small moments of recognition mattered more than I can explain. They stitched me back together, piece by piece, reminding me that I was still the same man who'd built relationships across the Southeast, who kept his word on handshake deals, who showed up early and stayed late when clients needed solutions. But I knew the real test was still coming. The final hearing would determine whether all the evidence, all the documentation, all the community support would actually matter when it counted. The morning of December 15th, Charlotte felt sharper than usual, the kind of December cold that cuts through your jacket and reminds you that winter means business. I walked up the courthouse steps slowly, not from fear anymore, but from the weight of everything that had led to this moment. Every humiliation, every sleepless night, every time I'd swallowed my pride because I didn't know how else to keep moving forward. Inside the courtroom, the wooden benches creaked under the shifting weight of neighbors, co-workers, and curious onlookers who'd followed my story like it was their favorite TV drama. Jessica's family occupied the front row, dressed like they were attending a charity gala instead of a legal proceeding. Richard Coleman wore a suit that probably cost more than my monthly truck payment, and Diane clutched her designer purse like it held the secrets to eternal happiness. Jessica entered with her attorney, a guy who looked like he'd stepped off a law firm billboard, tall, tanned, silver hair, suit that cost more than most people's cars. The kind of lawyer who charged by the syllable and made his living making honest people feel small. Austin Brooks wasn't there, I noticed. Apparently, when the legal bills started climbing and the easy money got complicated, Love had found more affordable neighborhoods. When the judge entered, everyone rose like we were in church. The room fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead and the distant sound of Charlotte traffic filtering through courthouse windows. Jessica's attorney started strong, his voice smooth as aged whiskey, and just as intoxicating if you weren't careful. Your Honor, my client has been the primary manager of this cryptocurrency investment portfolio. Mr. Sullivan contributed initial capital, but had no involvement in the day-to-day management, research, or decision-making that generated these remarkable returns. He is attempting to seize assets he had no role in creating. He said, remarkable returns, like he'd personally invented Bitcoin. Linda waited until he finished his performance before standing with the calm precision that comes from knowing you're holding all the right cards. She moved like a chess master who'd been planning this endgame for months. Your Honor, every claim just made is contradicted by documented evidence and, frankly, by basic partnership law. My client's wife signed legally binding partnership agreements that explicitly address this exact situation. Jessica rolled her eyes and whispered something to her attorney that made him adjust his tie nervously. The judge motioned for Linda to continue. She handed over copies of our partnership documents with the ceremony of someone presenting evidence in a murder trial. This agreement, drafted in 2019 and updated in 2021, clearly states that all cryptocurrency assets remain joint property regardless of account management or individual transaction authority. There was no legal separation at the time of asset appreciation, and furthermore, we have video evidence of the defendant's family admitting to fabricating separation documents after the investment gains were realized. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom, like wind through wheat. Someone in the back made a sound like air escaping from a tire. Jessica's attorney started shuffling through papers, like the truth might rearrange itself if he moved fast enough. That's when Jessica leaned across the courtroom's wooden barrier, her voice carrying like a stage whisper, designed for maximum audience impact. You were always just my safety net, Wade, a boring little maintenance man playing with big boy money. Nobody here believes a washed-up equipment salesman deserves what I earned. The words hung in the air like a slap that everyone could see coming, but nobody could prevent. But something strange happened in that moment. Instead of the familiar punch of humiliation, I felt something else entirely. A cold, calculating calm that started in my stomach and spread outward like ice water in my veins. I turned to face her fully for the first time since she'd walked into the courtroom. Jessica Coleman Sullivan, medical device sales superstar, with her perfect blonde highlights and her designer courtroom costume, sitting there like she'd already won some kind of prize. When I spoke, my voice was quiet enough that the judge had to lean forward to hear me. If I'm so worthless, Jessica, I said, each word dropping like a stone into still water, then why did you need my signature to start this investment? Why did you need my credit score to get the business account? And why are you sitting in that chair right now, fighting so hard to keep money that supposedly has nothing to do with me? Her face went through a fascinating transformation, confusion, then recognition, then something that looked almost like fear. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the fluorescent lights humming overhead. The judge cleared his throat with the kind of authority that reshapes lives with single sentences. Mrs. Sullivan, your attempt to claim exclusive ownership of jointly acquired assets, while simultaneously celebrating these gains publicly as joint achievements, demonstrates a pattern of calculated deception that this court finds deeply troubling. He leaned forward, his voice carrying the finality of church bells tolling. Therefore, Mr. Sullivan, the court awards you 50% of all cryptocurrency assets, totaling $1.5 million plus full reimbursement for legal fees and compensatory damages for emotional distress. The silence lasted exactly 3 heartbeats. Then Diane gasped like someone had punctured her lungs. Richard Coleman made a sound like a man watching his legacy crumble. Someone in the gallery whispered, "Justice served," loud enough to echo. But I kept my eyes on my work boots, the same ones that had walked through manufacturing floors for over 2 decades. I hadn't just won money. I'd won my dignity back, my name back, my place in a world that had tried to erase me. Justice, quiet and patient as winter steel, had finally arrived.